We're back with Justin Riley. We're going to dive into nutrition today. And on the topic of nutrition, we'll get to sort of your process, how you look at it, coaching, the history of how you approached nutrition coaching in your earlier years of running a gym and now you're doing it today. But for the listener, for somebody who's dialed in, who hits their protein every day, who tracks what they're doing, give us your last extreme go off the diet. Like, what would you do? Or recently, have you had like an epic cheat meal or an epic indulgence that really sings out to the listeners?
I actually have some before and after pictures from 4 days apart. I was thinking about, God, what do I want to do with this? Like, I don't even want to really share this with people. Oh my God, dude, I can't believe you asked me that.
Oh, let's go.
So I rarely drink alcohol anymore these days. I have no problem sticking to my meals. I love what I eat every day. And occasionally I do go off the reservation.
Yeah.
And the last time was over Labor Day weekend with my family. We have a place out on the Delta. And my brother-in-law, Chris, who actually follows your program.
Right on.
He was like part of Diablo CrossFit's competition training program at one point. So this dude's pretty fit. You know, he looks great. And you know, every time we go up there, Chris is the ringleader of coming out of the trailers with margaritas and different tequila drinks, and he loves making them. And he comes out with a huge smile on his face, handing them right to me, like. And it's kind of like a win in Rome thing. And my other brother is on the smoker like all weekend long. He's great at smoking meat, and there's food everywhere. You know, so I'm eating smoked meat and I'm drinking margaritas, and I literally came down. I'm not shitting you. I came home 10 pounds heavier in 2.5 days. 2.5 days, I was 10 pounds heavier. I weighed myself. I took a picture, and 3 days later, 9 of that had fallen back off of me, and 4 days later, I was back to where I started. But
wow,
you know,
yeah. Well, so that's smoked meats or like barbecue is like my absolute favorite indulgence.
So good.
I mean, it's good food and you can like eat it in a responsible way, but it's also just such a fun food to just be like, give me the whole family platter and I'm going to eat it myself.
Yeah.
But that's a good starting point to like, well, not even a starting point, but like people can have indulgences and then you get back into rhythms. And if you have been consistent before and after, you know, you can't fuck up your progress in 4 days if you.
I was hesitant to share it, right? Because it's like I'm coaching people and I'm putting them on goals and schedules and whatnot. And, you know, when they're on my program, I expect them to not be doing something like that. I think when you get to your goals and when you're maintaining, I think that's the appropriate time where you can make decisions like that. But when I have somebody and it's like, hey, we said by this date that you're going to weigh this amount, like I expect them to not be doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, but it's good. Like sharing that instead of saying like, this is how you do what you're doing, you say, this is why you're doing what you're doing.
Totally.
So that you can arrive at a place down the line where you have the flexibility to live a mostly, you know, structured life.
Yes.
And have even wild indulgences that take you completely off, but you've put in the work and you have the routines and the habits to come right back to it. And it's like, you know, I could, anybody listening, if they believed deeply and they knew it in their heart that like they could go and have a really great weekend, eat and drink, come back, and then by the end of the week, they're right back to where they were before. Yeah. That would be a huge like gift and sense of freedom that they're like, oh, I can live a life that's normal and still have what I want. It's not just a recipe for me falling off the.
Yeah, definitely. I think once somebody has achieved a goal that they are happy with the way that they look, feel, and perform, that's kind of my tagline. Like, you know, I want to optimize the way people look, feel, and perform. When you have gotten there, you do have the flexibility to go off the reservation and have some fun, and you can start to figure out how often that fits into your life. Mm-hmm. You know, but you do have to be careful because food and alcohol are addictive. So some people might go away and do that for a weekend and then not come back and get themselves back into their good habit structure. It's like, oh, well, maybe, I'm having a glass of wine tonight again. And there's some Cheetos over there or whatever, So you do have to be very aware and mindful that.
Yeah. And you would just argue that person maybe wasn't ready to take that big of a step outside of what they're doing and know that they could come back to it.
Yeah. I think there's also something that goes on when somebody really feels good about their progress. The tendency to get back into a bad pattern starts to get diminished, because it really does feel amazing when you're proud of the way you look and you've accomplished something like that. The drive to do those kind of things starts to go downward, and the healthy foods and the healthy habits start to taste really good and feel a lot better to you.
Yeah.
So ultimately that is the goal.
All right. Well, let's rewind a bit, because we had a conversation a few weeks back over Zoom, and you shared with me a little bit about the journey to where you're at today with regards to nutrition coaching and the importance of it in your life and in the lives of your clients. Where you started out, we've already, last week we talked extensively about your exercise and your fitness and your training background and expertise and experience. Let's go back to like early days. You're opening up your CrossFit gym. People are talking a little bit about, paleo. They're talking about the zone diet. Where were you? What was your stance on nutrition in comparison to training, and what was your bias and focus back then?
I'm going to rewind even a little further.
Go for it.
So my first experience with nutrition was high school wrestling, dropping 20 pounds coming out of football season, trying to be more competitive. And we essentially did that through just starving ourselves until we made weight, So I developed the discipline to be hungry and get my body weight way down. It wasn't the right way to do it. I wish that I could go instill knowledge in that, 15, 16-year-old kid of like, no, this is the way to do this. You don't have to starve. You can do this better. I started realizing that as I got a little bit older, but now on a whole nother level. I did study sports nutrition in college, although I will say they still were teaching the food pyramid when I went to college. So a lot of what was learned there was not really that useful. My first training job was at 24 Hour Fitness. They had a meal planning program that was part of the personal training program. So one of the first things you did was you sat down with people in this computer software system, and it cranked out these terrible meal plans. I mean, they were awful. And really it was a ploy for them to sell supplements, to sell these fat burning supplements and their protein and all this stuff that needed to go in your diet to follow the meal plan. Right. That was a short-lived experience for me. I ended up working at a country club and becoming a personal trainer there. But I knew I could only do so much in the weight room with people. And I knew that food was really the key to get them where they wanted to be. So I took my experience from meal planning and I started making meal plans for my clients. These things were painstaking to go to their house and figure out their food preferences and throw away all the crappy food that they had and figure out their schedule and then dial in a meal plan that didn't have weird stuff like a salad with no dressing. So I spent a lot of time doing this, and what happened was only maybe about 15% of my clients really followed it, and they got great results, and the rest didn't. And it was pissing me off because I put so much effort into it. And I put myself on a meal plan for a few weeks just to prove this point. I had actually never done a meal plan before.
Okay.
And I set out to lose, I think, 6 pounds in 3 weeks and, figured out the math and everything. And it literally came out exactly like that. So at that point, I just threw my hands up and I said, you know what? People don't want to listen to me. They don't want to do this. I'm a personal trainer. That's where I'm going to spend my time and effort.
Focus on the exercise.
CrossFit comes along. In 2007, I started getting around some of these competitors, and they're like, "Oh, the zone diet. I'm on the zone diet," and I'm like, "The zone diet, man, that's like 30% fat." I had learned low fat diet in college.
Yeah.
And so I was like scratching my head. I'm like, not only is the zone 30% fat, but a lot of these guys are telling me they're eating 3 times the fat of the zone, 5 times the fat of the zone. And I'm just like, I can't believe this. This is insane.
Yeah.
But knowing that meal plans were miserable, totally miserable, to have a laid out structure and plan to follow and check this list off. And then what happens with meal plans is you get one thing wrong and now you have 4 math problems to solve. and you like need a software program to do it, right? Because once your macros are off, how am I going to make the rest of this day fit?
Yeah.
After I messed up. The cool thing about the Zone was it was a little more of a template style, right? So it's like, oh, if I didn't get my protein blocks, I just put some protein blocks in. So I felt like it was a little more accessible, but I also knew my own discipline was going to struggle with that. So my first nutrition program in the Zone was a group program I launched at my gym, and I stood up in front of everybody and I told them that the reason why I'm doing this is to hold myself accountable. I brought you guys all in here to do this nutrition program because I will not do it unless I make you do it. And if I make you do it and I don't do it, that makes me an asshole. So I literally used all of them to make myself do it. And it worked really well. And I'd maintain, maybe 80% of the habits after a 6 or 8 week program. And I think the Zone helped me develop some pretty good habits, but I wasn't super disciplined on like tracking my foods and all of that for many, many years. And eventually I didn't really even want to do the group programs anymore because about 60% of those people would quit before we finished. And I just had a lot of trouble with that. I didn't want to be part of something that was overwhelmingly a failure. I couldn't even really celebrate the 30% of people that like did a great job because I couldn't get my mind off of the people that quit. It just bothered me. So I stopped doing those, and many years go by. And it's kind of a funny story, but I have a good friend that runs this company, sleeptest.com. I'm going to plug it here because if you snore, you need to get that taken care of. And I went on a trip with my buddy that runs this company. He heard me snoring on a couch all night, a couple nights in a row. And he said, I'm sending you the kit when you get home. So he sent me a sleep test. I got diagnosed with obstructive airway syndrome, which is why I was snoring. I could see drops in my oxygenation level along with increases in my heart rate while I'm sleeping. So here's this guy that trains hard, want to perform well, and I can see that my recovery is not good through this data on my sleep test. So I got a mouthpiece that treated my snoring, and it was life-changing. I mean, my energy levels went through the roof. My immune system came back online. I stopped getting colds, and I felt great. Wow. So if you snore, I'm telling you right now, don't screw around. Like, it's no joke. You're going to die sooner because of it. You're not going to perform well. Like, you need to get your sleep dialed. Fast forward a few years, my snoring is treated. I'm doing fine. And I get a new dog, and he eats my dental appliance. So now snoring is back. And I've been using an app for years to track it. And in that app, I would log things in my day. And one of those things I would log was if I drank. When I started looking back through the data to figure out how am I going to treat this snoring, I had no idea that seeing 4 or 5 drinks a week on my data, it bothered me to the core. I was like, why do I do that? That's so ridiculous that I drink 4 or 5 alcoholic beverages a week. I thought nothing of it until I saw the data. And when I saw it, I'm like, I'm not doing that anymore. So that was step 1 for me. And what happened was I dropped about 5 pounds really, really quick. At the same time that was going on with some of my personal training clients, I had put them on a protein plan. These women, I said, hey, I want you to eat 100 grams of protein a day. Let's go. 2 of them that needed to lose a little weight lost 10 pounds in a month just by me telling them to eat 100 grams of protein. The other one that was underweight actually started getting really strong. And so partway through their process, they flipped it on me and they said, oh, how much protein do you eat there, Chief? And I kind of was smug. I was like, oh, I eat plenty of protein. They're like, no, write it down like you made us do. And so I did. And I was weighing about 195 at the time. And I came up with like 140 grams of protein. And I was like, damn, I'm not doing it either. So now next step was I'm eating protein every day, the amount I'm supposed to eat, 200 grams, right? Well, I lost another 5 pounds without trying to change anything else. It stopped me from snacking on things that I shouldn't be eating. Now I'm not drinking. Now I'm not eating junk food anymore. And I was getting really pretty lean. And anytime I'd been that lean in the past, performance and strength would start to take a hit. And so I was kind of worried that I was getting to that level. I didn't want to see that happen. And that's where tracking came in for me. I wanted to track for a couple weeks to really dial in what I was doing to make sure that I didn't lose strength and performance. And I only planned on doing it for 2 weeks, but at the end of 2 weeks, I'm like, this is so easy. So what I didn't realize was that these modern apps right on your phone where you can track your food are so convenient and so easy to use. I never had that before. I didn't have that in the meal planning days. I didn't have that in the zone days. And I just didn't really know like how simple it really was. And so I ended up losing like another 5 pounds. So now I'm down from just over 200 pounds to 185. And I'm like, dude, I look great. I feel great. I'm literally getting PRs on CrossFit workouts from 13 years ago when I used to be in the CrossFit games. And now I'm 43 years old and beating my Fran time, and I don't even really train for CrossFit anymore. I'm like, I got to see if I can get people approaching this the way that I'm doing it.
What was happening with your snoring at this point? Had you solved that?
So it took about 3 months to get back through the process of getting a new dental appliance made.
Yeah.
So that was kind of all part of it. So
the dental appliance is still, that's still your solve for the snoring, but because you had gotten yourself into the situation where you're like, oh, I'm struggling with the snoring thing again, and you're tracking data, and then you're looking at it. This was just a step-by-step of like, okay, the alcohol first, then the protein, then I'm going to track even more closely. All in that process, you're taking one step at a time, and you're seeing these significant improvements in your body composition, dropping weight, performing better. And so you're now at this point where you're like, I'm conscious of my alcohol. I'm definitely hitting my protein every day. And now I'm starting to zero in on the total energy that I'm taking in by tracking all the food.
Yep.
And you're like, this is a system that makes a lot of sense. How do I get other people to do it?
I was having such an easy time living with it that I've never had that experience living with trying to eat right before. It's always been a burden. And when I realized that doing it like this is so easy, I'm like, I gotta see if I can teach other people. And so I hit up some of the people. There was a protein challenge first, which was just my attempt to do something good for my gym, something free that would benefit people. There was a lot of benefit. There were about, I think 40 people in my gym took this 30-day protein challenge and got varying degrees. But I took some of those people and I said, hey, I want to coach you for the next 12 weeks. And I started off with 3, and 3 turned into 6, and 6 turned into 12. And I'm like, okay, I think I have time for a few more. And then there was a wait list that was growing longer than I could ever get to. And I realized I'm like, I got to get some more coaches. And so I started reaching out to, people that had this nutrition thing dialed already, that were already tracking. Megan, Kristen, they've been doing this even longer than me. And they were like, yeah, I want to do that too, And so I started developing a systematic approach to how are we going to look at somebody's nutrition and what are the things we're going to focus on to get them dialed into this system too.
Do you mind unpacking what that system is? I mean, just sharing what's
really simple. It's not revolutionary.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm going to say it over and over again on my page. There's nothing revolutionary that we're doing. All we're doing is we have you record a week of food and we look at it. And we look at those numbers and we find, hey, these habits are good. These are working towards your goal of getting enough protein and keeping your calories where they belong. And here's some things you're doing that are not. And so let's start minimizing those things. Let's start maximizing these things. And you work off the habits that somebody already has that are good. Yeah. And you start maximizing those and minimizing the habits that are working against them. Yeah. And so everybody's, basically we manage 2 numbers. Get your protein and stay under your calories, and that's it. And however you want to do that is fine. I think a lot of times nutrition programs, nutritionists, they have too many rules. Yeah. Right? You can't have gluten. You can't eat this thing because it's in a package. This has seed oils in it. Blah, 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 blah. And what happens is people are overwhelmed and they have so many parameters that they can't do it.
Yeah.
So by simply telling them, hey, we're going to manage these 2 numbers and we're going to figure out what habit structures get you to those 2 numbers, it starts to become easy, right? At first, people do weird things. I give them the numbers and then I look at the second week after that, and it's like, dude, you had boiled chicken and broccoli for dinner. Like that sounds horrible.
It worked for the numbers, but do you want to keep doing that for the next 5 years?
You're not going to do that the rest of your life, right? So how can we adjust the rest of your day so you can have something more enjoyable at dinner time?
Yeah, there you go.
Right? So there's sort of 2 things I came up with. I think they exist in nutrition, but I think I'm speaking them in a different language than I've heard other people say before. Okay. So one of the ideas that I started really honing in on, I call it delayed caloric density. And so what it is the idea of we want you to eat less calorically dense things as far into your day as you can. Mm-hmm. And if you did a good job, you've got a little calorie bank left over for dinner. And so now there might be some room for rice or potatoes or tortillas or, you know, those things we really like. Sure. And I think it's really powerful to have those rewards at the end of the day because you did such a good job throughout the day. Love it. Another one that I just made a video on, I call it the protein calorie efficiency ratio. So most people, if you look at how much protein do they need, and this will vary individual from person to person, right? We talk about this 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. It's a great starting place, but there might be some reasons to adjust up or down from there. But if you look at most people's numbers on a deficit, they're going to have, let's say it's 140 grams of protein is what they need. Probably about 10 times that number is how many calories they need to lose weight. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at foods or building meals, can I get that ratio? For breakfast, let's say you're having 40 grams of protein, that meal should probably be around 400 calories or less, right? And if you can keep doing that throughout the day or beating that efficiency ratio, then in the dinner time, you have room to play a little bit. Mm-hmm. You know, and I find that when people can start developing these concepts, they feel really satisfied with the way that they're eating. Yeah. So this might all sound complicated, and it's a process. And what we do is we look at the food you ate over a week. We give you your numbers. Week 2, you probably do some weird things to hit those numbers. So we start unraveling, like, how can we make this day better? What was your schedule? What happened this day? You know, somebody might say, oh, I was traveling. Okay, well, you're probably going to be traveling again in 2 weeks. So how are we going to solve the problems of when you take a flight to San Diego? Or somebody might say, oh, you know, I got caught up at work for 4 hours in a row. Okay, well, that's your life. Yeah. You're going to have that day again. So how do we plan for that? How do we make sure next time that happens to you that you don't blow your day? Mm-hmm. And so it really starts to become a process of problem solving where we meet with the client every week on a FaceTime call and we look at what they messed up, what they did well, and we start solving those problems week by week. And what happens is by about week 3 or 4, I'm getting on these calls and people are just smiling ear to ear. They've got it figured out now.
Yeah, that's such a quick turnaround too. It's like
it's so easy. It really blows my mind still, like how easy it is.
And I will just for the listener, it's like it is that easy, and we both totally understand that the way you've been fed nutritional information to this point makes you believe it's very complicated. And so the kind of the starting energy is how do we overcome this massively overly complicated thing that has been created by diet culture and by 1,000 different types of nutritional methods out there. The thing that I'm hearing here, which is, you know, so like in our last conversation about training, was like, wow, we're solving the same problems. We have different language to talk about it, but we're arriving at similar solutions. Same thing with nutrition. I try and tell people that the principles underlying every single diet are the same. Let's get as like fundamental
caloric deficit, right?
It's calories, energy balance, and high quality protein. If those 2 things are met, then there's a million ways to slice that, you know, that pie, right? Yeah. And so for you, you're saying the same thing. It's like, I want you to hit your calories. I want you to hit your protein. These are the numbers that are working, and you start to evaluate their habits. We start to play up the good habits. We start to have them switch their bad habits into things that are more productive for this. I love this idea of, you know, hitting your nutrient dense foods early, calorically, you know, low density foods. Yep. We call them high performance foods. We've got our blog posts with all of the top ones. Yeah. It's like, hey, hit high performance foods 90% of the day, and then at the end of the day, you've got room to have a Reese's peanut butter cup or whatever you want, and it will totally fit within, because people want to be, they want to feel reward. And at the end of the day, people want to fuel to reach their goals, but they also want to be entertained by food. I want to be entertained by food from time to time. Yes. Like, it doesn't need to be, you know, boiled chicken and broccoli every day, but there's going to be some simplicity in the foods that we select most of the time. And like you had said already, it over time becomes enjoyable to eat, you know, cottage cheese and berries and the same protein shake and the same things. But hey, I want to be able to like have some pasta and red sauce at night to go along with my vegetables and steak.
when you get people eating intentfully and out of the situation of eating reactively, right? Because most people just are reacting to their environment and their hunger cues.
Yes.
So they go through their day and it's like, oh, I'm hungry. I'm in the break room and there's pizza or there's donuts or whatever, and they're hungry and they're eating it, right? And some of these people have this idea that they eat so healthy because they have salads at night and they eat avocados and they eat bananas and yogurt for breakfast, right? But tracking is super powerful because what happens is people see, hey, that banana had 25 grams of sugar in it and your yogurt had 18 grams of sugar in it, and you already used half of your calories for breakfast that you need to be eating.
Yes.
And it's really simple changes to start adjusting some of those foods. Like, hey, let's find you a low sugar yogurt instead.
Yeah.
Let's maybe have half of that banana instead. And let's, or maybe, a lot of people eat too many eggs. I mean, I love eggs, but if you're a smaller female that needs to eat 14 or 1500 calories to get weight off of your body, you can't be eating 3 eggs for breakfast because the amount of fat content that was in that compared to the protein, it's just not efficient, right? So what do we do instead? How can we balance that meal to make it efficient for you?
Yeah.
And
there's really nothing that's like, there are no bad foods. It's just when we look at the data and we become very focused on the inputs and the outputs and the actual numbers, then it starts to highlight what makes hitting those numbers easier and what makes it harder. If I have 6 eggs for breakfast in order to get my grams of protein that I want, I can do that, but I just chewed up a lot of my budget for the day. And so I'm going to have to make compromises later that might feel more difficult than if I started with something that was right when our discipline and our willpower is highest in the morning. If we start with choices that don't eat up as much of our calorie budget early in the day, then in the evening when you're kind of wanting, like you're tired, you're fatigued from the day, you want to have more flexibility in what you eat, you can set yourself up for that by having a great start and a great middle of your day.
Habit structure is so important. Again, eating intentfully versus just reacting to your environment. So starting to develop routines, right? And maybe that routine looks different on a day that you work versus a day that you don't work. Or maybe a day that you work and work out, or a day that you just work and don't work out. And so starting to solve the days for your routines in your life,
beautiful,
is super, super important. And that's really what we do in our program is we hold people accountable to like, hey, here's the numbers I want you to hit, and we'll adjust them. If they need to be adjusted, we adjust them. And knowing that they're going to have a coach that's going to get on there and they looked at everything you did, their motivation level to do well goes up.
Yes.
And then they start doing well and they start experiencing the results and they start looking good and their friends are giving them a compliment like, hey, what are you doing? That feels so good. And what happens is their palate starts to change, right? So when you get people off of these hyper palatable foods that are flaring off the dopamine receptors in our brains, and you get them away from that and you get them successful, all of a sudden, like, hey, that cottage cheese and berries starts to taste really good.
Yeah.
You know?
Let me ask you a question, because I have to answer this often. We're fans of looking at the data and tracking so that you can, because it's so powerful. It teaches you so much.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, let me know if this comes across your table, your office table, your desk. Hey, I just don't want to track. I mean, I'm not going to track for the rest of my life. So why do I have to do it now? Like, it just seems like it's just cumbersome and, I'm not going to be doing this into my 60s. So why now?
I mean, God, there's so many ways to attack this. One of the things that, tracking gets really criticized, right? You see a lot of people online, a calorie is not a calorie and tracking your calories doesn't work. And, I think a lot of people are just trying to say catchy stuff to get attention and sell programs a lot of times. I think the number one thing that I would say is to that argument, I'll get back to your question in a second, is what do the highest level physique athletes in the world do? So the people that get up on the stage in bikinis, what do they do to look like that? They track every bite that goes in their mouth. It's clearly the most effective tool to reaching a physique goal and a healthy body composition. are you going to do it for the rest of your life? So in my program, very early on, and week 1, and every week I talk about sustainability. I want to plant those seeds of what is this going to look like for you after we finish 12 or 24 or 36 weeks or whatever length of program we're doing. It's super, super crucial to me that I am building in an outlook on the future of how they're going to sustain where they get to. Now, for some people, that might look like always tracking. Mm-hmm. I mean, I only spend, sometimes I geek out on a food or a day or something like that, but most of the days in my habit structure, I'm spending less than 5 minutes in the entire day on weighing and measuring. Mm-hmm. It really is that easy. And that's why I just always do it, because I can land every single day right where I want to, and I can choose when it's time to not do that. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel obsessive to me at all. It feels good. Yeah. And, I'm at a performance level and a physique level at 43 years old and maintaining it easily that I've never been able to do before. Yeah. So why would I not do that? Now, maybe some people don't like feeling that restraint of having to get on the app and track all their food. So what are we going to do? Go ahead and stop. You have a good habit structure. You know what to eat for breakfast and what to eat for lunch and how to structure these days. Go ahead and stop tracking. Mm-hmm. See what happens. Maybe you have learned well enough to eat intuitively and go forward with your life. But here's the cool thing. You have now learned a skill where if you are weighing yourself and you're looking in the mirror and you're starting to not be super stoked on what the scale says and what you look like in the mirror, you have a system you can go right back to and put yourself right back where you belong anytime you want. Yeah. Some people that have finished, I've been so happy that the people that have finished my program have just done such an amazing job of maintaining their results. Yeah, cool. And I get text messages every day from people that are excited. They're 3 months, they're 6 months done, and they're texting me and they're like, I just got back from a trip. I weigh the same amount. They're just excited and they're doing a great job. Yeah. Some of those people track on and off. Some of them don't track when they're home because their habit structures have become so dialed they don't need to. Mm. So they maybe only track when they're on the road to really make sure they're hitting their protein numbers or whatever. Each person can have a different approach to it. But once you've learned this skill, you can always go back to it if you want to, or if you're super comfortable with it the way I am, you can just do it. Yeah. It's up to you. And there are different ways to skin that cat.
Yeah. That's a beautiful answer to it. And I have a lot of respect for the way that you've kind of gone through this journey of nutrition, solving your own challenges and your own obstacles, having an early experience that was really negative with meal planning and with looking at, compliance rates of clients and getting turned off by it, but not just writing it off forever and coming back to it and coming back to it and coming back to it until you found something that really work for yourself and work for other people. And I think it's a great lesson in that for people who are listening, that most people who have attempted diets or, a nutrition plan have likely failed a number of times. The vast majority of diets fail, not in the short term, but in the long term. And if you've been burned by it many times and it's gotten to the point where you're like, nothing's ever going to work, then, that's where I think people can take a valuable lesson from your experience, where it's like, yeah, nothing worked. Wow, something is really working. And if you just are persistent and you listen, to people with sound advice who are approaching it from a principle-based, not a method-based. And so it's like, what's the principle? And then how do you approach it to hit the principles? You want to listen to people that, like yourself, that are talking about principles. And if you can align to people like that, there's a way to hack modern culture with healthy, sustainable habits around food that can give you the vitality and the body that you want. And I think it's just such a cool story. Thank you for sharing it. And how can people find you? Where can they go and learn more about what you're doing? And
yeah, the hub of what we're doing is on Instagram. So get on there, look up the Protein RX. So at the Protein RX, the protein prescription. You'll see a lot of before and after results on there. You'll see reels with tips on eating. I'm big on mindset too. So a lot of my videos are just really encouraging people that you can do this and why you need to do this and that kind of stuff. So, listen to those, plant the seeds in your head of success and plant the seeds in your head of you can do this, because you can. Anybody can do it. Like, nobody is special. None of the pictures you see on that page of middle-aged women who have their abs showing now, who have 2 kids, they're not special. They're just as busy as you. They have the financial hardships that you have. They have, the mental blocks working against them. They have every single thing that you have, and they overcame it.
Yeah.
And everybody can do that. All they got to do is start taking steps in the right direction. I think, obviously I'm biased here, but I think hiring a coach is just one of the most powerful things that you can do. I hire coaches for everything I want to get good at. Why go at it alone? Why try to learn a new skill when there's somebody that knows it better than me?
Awesome. Justin, thank you, man. Appreciate you being here, bringing the crew down to work out, getting a couple podcasts in. I encourage everybody to go check him out on Instagram, and to reconnect with you after over a decade has been really rewarding. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, man. It's been a blast.
All right, FBB Nation, we will see you next week. And who knows who's going to be the guest? It could be me with Satya again, or it could be somebody else. We don't know. It's a mystery. All right, we'll see you next time.